Happy holidays, Dark Valiants and friends. It's not the holiday season without a little Mortis Maledictum holiday special now, is it? Well, this year we went ahead and did something a little bit different. We reached out to our audience to see if anyone wanted to write this year's special, and you did not disappoint. This year's holiday special, titled The Problem After Christmas, was written by Serial Designation O and produced by our Dark Arc Media team. We cannot wait for you to hear it. We hope you enjoy The Problem After Christmas. Happy holidays.
It was the day after Christmas when Steve woke up from a horrible dream. He had soaked the sheets with sweat. There had been this thing. He didn't know how to describe it, and the details of his dream flitted away as he stood under the hot water of the shower. His gift for his fiancée had been wonderful. She'd loved it. He'd gotten some of his blood melted into some iron and had made it into a necklace. The cherry on top was the pretty green jade, her favorite gemstone. Altogether, the necklace was a protection charm from him to her. Or at least that's what the woman in the shop who sold it to him said. Some online posts had warned against the seller, citing shoddy craftsmanship mostly. He didn't care, though. She loved it, and that was all that mattered in the end. And bonus, it was local. Supporting locals always made him feel good. He dressed and went to the kitchen, where Jeannie was making breakfast. She hadn't stopped wearing the necklace since she put it on last night. Her face lit up when he gave her the wrapped box. She immediately put it around her neck when she saw it. They had spent the evening curled up on the couch, watching holiday movies. She hadn't stopped playing with the bead of iron while the movie lit her face in the glow of the TV. Now, even this morning, she played with it absently while making pancakes. The two were ready for a nice, relaxing winter day. Neither of them had to work today, or even tomorrow, after all. As the two ate, Steve's dream drifted back into his mind, the details sharper than they had been even when he woke up, and his hand trembled at the memory. It had been a horrible scenario. He was fighting off spiders and bats standing over his wife, defending her on his bed. The last thing he remembered was an enormous wave about to drown him before he woke up.
Did you sleep well, Jean?
He tried to calm himself down and not let a tremor enter his voice. She smiled back at him.
It was wonderful. I saw you protecting me from some evil men.
That's funny. I had a dream about protecting you last night, too. Maybe that necklace is really working.
They both laughed, but for Steve, there was a hint of the nightmare touching the corners of his smile. Neither of them believed in the supernatural at all, just coincidences. He explained the meaning of the necklace to her after she'd put it around her neck the night before. She'd said that she loved the thought of him protecting her from monsters and evil spirits. Jean thought it was a cute and lovely gesture. Steve was simply relieved that she liked the present. After breakfast was over, they went to watch a ghost hunting show. They loved watching the people run around in the dark with terrible night vision cameras looking like idiots. All the fake, "Oh my God," and "Can you hear us?" always got them going. Partway through the third episode of the day, Jeannie said she started feeling sick and excused herself to the bathroom. Jeannie rushed over to the bathroom and threw herself at the toilet as she felt herself vomit. She felt horrible, like part of her was leaving her body. Technically, it was her stomach acids coming up and spilling into the toilet bowl. She coughed a few times after it all came out. She sat there, looking at the green liquid mixture. Nothing looked wrong, just the acid. She felt like she was in danger, but from what? She wasn't sure. She flushed the toilet and got a glass of water from the kitchen. She washed the horrible taste from her mouth with a few swishes of water. She got next to Steve. The weird feeling went away. She felt safe again. She snuggled up to her husband again, watching more idiots run around, claiming to find ghosts. The rest of the day was uneventful, and the two went to sleep again. Steve held a sword, standing outside the front door of his house. A scream came from inside the house. He pushed the door open, rushing to the sound of his wife, but a wave of dozens of tiny creatures with tiny red hats tugged on his clothes and clung to his legs. One successfully tripped him as he ran by. The sword slid across the wood floor. He tried to get up, but more tiny creatures piled on top of him, and his vision went dark. He woke up again in a cold sweat, sitting beside his wife. He got up to get a shower, panting as though he'd just finished running a marathon. The hot water helped calm him, washing last night's terror sweat away and making him a new man once again. He hoped he could forget about that awful dream, like the soap sluicing off his back. The day went the same as the last. The pair ate breakfast together, watched cheesy ghost hunter shows, and enjoyed the company of each other and the house they lived in. Jeannie didn't get sick that day. "Can you hear us?" The male lead on TV spoke into a small blinking device Jeannie and Steve knew did nothing. "Give us a sign." The pair had a crashing noise from the kitchen, and they looked up from the television. Then, a vase fell from the end table across the living room. Steve and Jeannie got up, both with shocked looks on their faces. Cautiously, Steve stepped closer to where the vase lay broken on the floor, careful not to step onto the ceramic shards.
What was it?
Jeannie's voice sounded concerned, and rightfully so.
I don't know.
Steve remembered the dream he had and the little men in red hats. He had heard the folklore about the need to pay redcaps or else they'll cause mischief. It had been just a dream, and yet there were 2 unexplainable incidents within 10 seconds.
I'll clean this up. Go check the kitchen to see what fell there.
With everything that had been happening recently, Steve could no longer discount the fact that there was something going on. He looked back over his shoulder, expecting Jeannie to be making her way to the kitchen, but instead she stood so still she could have been made of marble. Thin, wispy threads draped from her arms and shoulders, leading off to the nearby window. Steve rushed back to her, tearing the threads from his wife. She remained unresponsive until, at last, the final thread fell. Jeannie took in a deep, gasping breath, her chest heaving. Steve hurriedly shoved the bundle of golden threads out the window, into the cold air. He pulled the window closed again, pausing. He didn't remember it being open in the first place. How had the window gotten opened, and where had the threads come from? In his haste, Steve hadn't seen that the golden threads had come from a rose bush beside the window. They loved how much it bloomed in the springtime with bright, vibrant pink blossoms. Steve returned to his wife's side.
Are you okay, Jeannie?
I'm okay, Steve. Thank you. I'm getting tired. Can you get me a coffee, no creamer?
You're coming with me if I'm leaving the room.
Steve was worried that the thread would find some way to sneak back in, even though he closed the window.
I guess it probably won't be a bad idea.
Jeannie slowly got up and walked him over to the kitchen as the TV kept playing in the background. Steve made a normal cup of black coffee and gave it to her, which she took in unsteady hands. Jeannie looked down at her fingers, a confused look crossing her features. She sat on a stool and drank her coffee at the kitchen bar.
It's almost lunch. Would you be so kind as to cook us something, dear?
Sure, hon. Does grilled cheese and tomato soup sound okay?
She nodded happily, still exhausted and still trembling. Her concern hadn't quite gone away by the time the coffee was. And Steve watched her carefully out of the corner of his eye while working away, warming up the stove and moving to grab ingredients from the refrigerator. He grabbed the necessary stuff and then began making the sandwiches, layering the cheese between the pieces of bread. He put the simple layered sandwich on the pan and put the tomato sauce and water into a pot. As he poured the tomato sauce into the pot, his vision flashed to another scene briefly. It was in another kind of kitchen, full of chemicals and herbs. He wasn't holding a can here. He was holding a chopped arm, letting blood fall into the pot for some kind of potion, he could only assume. A ringing whine built up pressure behind his eyes, and the edges of his vision pulsed red. He shook his head, and the vision was gone as fast as it had appeared. What was going on? He mixed the soup together, and then made another sandwich for himself. He poured some soup into a bowl and gave the grilled cheese and tomato soup to his wife, where she still sat at the bar. He watched her for a second, admiring her beauty as she bit into the grilled cheese. He felt his chest tighten, getting a faint reminder of the golden thread from outside. He brushed the thought away and kept making his own sandwich. His was a nice crispy golden brown. As Steve bit into his wonderful sandwich, he felt a weird feeling. There was something going on down his throat. He was back there in that other kitchen, the wicked place. The ringing returned and the pressure of the vision dizzied him. The whole room looked as though it were carved out from the rock of a mountain, digging in until there was a cavernous space. Then, just as strangely, the carver picked up their tools and left, with everything only half finished. The pillars that held up the roof were rough and jagged. The unfinished bar lay cluttered with implements. There were tubes going into beakers and arms hanging on meat hooks. The most striking difference, though, was that in the place of his wife, there was a pale, malnourished-looking woman with golden hair surrounded by small green men with red hats. Golden threads of her hair fell and draped over the bar across the floor onto his body. Steve realized in horror the threads led to his mouth and choked him. He pulled at it, coughing, trying his best to get it out. He heard a voice faintly in the background. All he could do was stare at this creature as it tried to pull its hair from him.
Steve!
Jeannie's hand grabbed his shoulder, and Steve was back. He dropped his sandwich onto the floor in all the commotion, and his heart raced.
No. I think I need to rest. I know you're gonna stay up, but please make sure the windows and the doors are closed tightly. We don't want any of that cold air to get in.
Even so, Steve tried to not admit to himself that this was all real. He left her and went up to their bedroom and laid down to rest. She watched her precious husband go up the stairs and walk into their bedroom. Afterwards, Jeannie slowly went and cleaned up the lunch that he dropped on the floor and turned the stove off. He was sure freaked out a lot over something, but what it was she couldn't tell. It was probably good he was resting. She had not seen him panic like that in a long time. Something was off about that day. She couldn't quite put a finger on it. But playing with the iron and jade necklace Steve had given her brought a little comfort to her worry. Jeannie went around and checked every window and door, double making sure they were all closed and locked. She didn't know why he was being so paranoid about it. They had never had to worry about their heating bill or anything like that. Sitting down on the couch to watch more television, Jeannie felt a strange tugging on the hem of her pants. She absently swatted it away, thinking it was her cat. The only problem was, she didn't own a cat. Why would Jeannie even think that? The tugging resumed, and she swatted at it again, but this time looked down. A small, clawed hand reached out from under the edge of the couch and wrapped around her ankle. She screamed and jumped up, standing on top of the couch cushions, looking around wildly. Then, just as suddenly, the fear and the memory washed over her. What was she doing standing on the couch? Steve, hearing his wife scream, raced back into the living room moments later, wild-eyed and holding a baseball bat they kept next to the bed. When he arrived, he didn't see the clawed hands reaching up from under the couch. He saw the woman with the golden thread standing in the room's corner, behind his wife. She chanted under her breath, and the threads lanced forward from her, latching onto Jeannie's body. As each touched her skin, his wife let out a tiny shudder before a calm and absent look came over her face. Bellowing his fear and anger, Steve charged towards the woman.
Get away from
her! But he didn't get to her. Dozens of small creatures billowed out from under the couch, clawing and scratching at him. They piled onto his back and drove Steve down to one knee. All the while, the woman continued her soft chant and golden threads wove themselves between her and his wife. The last thing Steve saw, as the redcaps bore him to the ground, claws flashing and his blood flowing freely, was the woman staring at him with golden eyes.
Thank you for the pendant. The summons you made was such a wonderful touch.